If you take the history of the armed ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, you will see that the Tamil movement, which started off as a small scale, low intensity guerrilla guerrilla movement, expanded almost overnight, almost in the course of 5-6 months, when India got involved in 1983. India's involvement was large, as it has done in that period in other parts of South Asia and Central Asia, not Central Asia, in Afghanistan and in that region. India had reasons to believe that the Sri Lankan government was moving into the US sphere of influence. In 1983, the Sri Lankan government renewed a 10-year contract to upgrade for America to acquire 1,000 acres of land on Sri Lanka's west coast, to upgrade its Voice of America and upgrade and build a new larger Voice of America facility. Now, India and Russia at that time accused the US of setting up extreme low frequency transmitters in the Voice of America station. And these transmitters, the ELF transmitters, were apparently meant to detect the movement of Russian nuclear submarines in the Indian Ocean, which India also objected to, that the US was using the Voice of America agreement to set up monitoring facilities that were going against India's strategic interests, strategic security environment, what India called its strategic security environment in the south. Plus, India assumed that the Sri Lankan government was going to hand over a large tank farm in Trincomalee to the US through companies registered in Singapore, and there were some devious and surreptitious deals to give this tank farm in Trincomalee, to bring this tank farm under US control. And also the United Kingdom had sent its special forces to train the Sri Lankan army, and the Sri Lankan government was openly seeking military assistance against the Tamil liberation movement from the US. And in 1983, around this time, the Sri Lankan government openly urged the British government to renew a defense treaty that had become defunct in 1956. After the Suez Canal closed, the British Royal Navy no longer needed Sri Lanka as a forward base to control Asia, or to have a vantage point in Asia, which they did during World War II, when Sri Lanka was the Southeast Asia headquarters for the Royal Navy. So India armed the Tamil movement and expanded it to apply pressure on the Sri Lankan government to toe the line. By 1987, the Sri Lankan government realized that it could not counter India's tactics in arming the Tamil movement. India itself had no interest in seeing Tamils seceding from Sri Lanka, because then it would have a rebound effect in South India. So they want to use the Tamil liberation movement as an instrument to bring pressure on the Sri Lankan government, and then to compel the Sri Lankan government to sign a treaty where the Sri Lankan government gave up its external self-determination. That is, under the treaty, which it was signed, which the Sri Lankan government signed under duress after a direct threat from India. It is prevented from handing over Trincomalee to anyone but India. It is prevented from allowing foreign intelligence and military personnel from operating in Sri Lanka without India's sanction, and using the Voice of America without India's supervision. Any instruments to be installed in the Voice of America station had to be, under the treaty, had to be inspected by India. So like this, and the treaty also required that Sri Lanka train its armed forces and have armed forces in India and have intelligence exchange primarily with India. So with the treaty, Sri Lanka was expected to come within the Indian strategic fold. Now this has changed this has been been changing over time. The US has tried to sign a defense treaty called Access and Cross-Servicing Agreement, which it has signed with Philippines to make up for the loss of the Subic Bay. And this Access and Cross-Servicing Treaty allows the US to turn Sri Lanka into a Germany. Like, it can have its own bases, it can come and go at will, it can bring in nuclear armed ships or planes. But India stopped. But with that, a certain Cold War has begun in Sri Lanka, where the US government is very obviously trying to bring the Colombo governments under its influence through using economic means, trade pacts. They have been using various means, and also the US has been heavily involved in training the Sri Lankan army, and there was an increasing level of special forces presence, US special forces presence in the northeast, although they were not directly involved in combat. Some of the what I would call the vanguard units of the Sri Lankan army were trained and raised by the US Pacific Command. But of course, that they were completely defeated is another story.